Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the performance on the PC for Forza Horizon 3, which is coming out on Tuesday, but you can actually get the game a few days early if you pick up the Ultimate Edition. That's what I did, so that's how I was able to play the game 4 days early. But the Ultimate Edition costs $100. It does come along with the Season Pass and stuff like that, which I really didn't need personally, but I wanted to get the game a few days early so that we could test it here on the channel, so that's what I went ahead and did. So we are going to be taking a look here at the PC performance with a GTX 1080. We also got the RX 480 and my GTX 1060, and we are testing that in my main system to try to eliminate any bottlenecks here. So you're going to be seeing those specs on your screen right now. And for the drivers, we are using the latest from NVIDIA as well as AMD, which are both optimized specifically for Forza Horizon 3. So for NVIDIA, that's driver 372.90, and for AMD, that's 16.9.2. So those are both the latest drivers as of the time of me making this video. So before we get into the performance numbers, let's go into the options menu and see the options that are available to us and what we were using. I was running the game up at Ultra with 4 times MSAA. So you can see here that we do have an unlocked frame rate option, which is really great to see because we know we haven't seen those on some of the UWP titles from Windows, which this is. You can only get this on the Microsoft Store at this time for the PC or Xbox One. And if you get it for the Xbox One or the PC, you could play it on both of them. It's that new crossover thing, whatever they're calling it. So you can see here we do have an unlocked variable option, or you can set it down to, different things based on what your screen's refresh rate. Mine is 144, so these numbers may differ if you're on a 60 hertz monitor. It'll likely be 60 and 30 here for the options that'll be available to you guys on a 60 hertz monitor if that's what you are running. So I also got VSync off in here, obviously, for my testing, and I did run motion blur off as well. Right now we're in 1440p, but it does have ultra-wide support. I tested ultra-wide, and I'm going to show you guys some screenshots so you can get an idea of where the HUD placement is when you are playing on ultra-wide, because I know that some of you guys like to see that stuff, and I will put a link to an imager gallery down in the description below if you do want to go ahead and look at that. It's got the you got the HUD off at the sides. With some people I know, they like to have the HUD more towards the middle. For me personally, though, on a game like this, I prefer to have the HUD off to the sides. You can let me know down in the comments below what you guys want to see there. Obviously, we also got 4K support and everything, basically, and everything in between 1080 and 4K. So no issues there as far as resolution and unlocked frame rate were concerned. All of that stuff was good to go. They also have an option in here to show the FPS, which is really helpful. It doesn't give any detailed information like we have seen in some titles, but at least they do have an FPS counter on. I had to do my average FPS counting, and the minimum FPS is using mirrorless action, because right now that's the only thing I can really use with DirectX 12 is mirrorless action. So in here we also have our advanced options. Actually, before we get into that, I want to point out that there is an option in here for dynamic optimization, and what that does is where it actually adjusts the visual settings dynamically as you're playing the game to try to give you the best performance possible. So that is something you could use if you're having trouble getting consistent performance, but be aware that it is basically dynamically changing the visual settings as you play. And for me personally, I want to know in the back of my mind that the game is up at the highest settings or whatever I happen to set them to, and it's not going to go ahead and change off of that. So we can see here the settings that I was using in my testing. We got the anisotropic filtering here all the way maxed up. We got a decent amount of customization options in here, I will say, on this game. We also got shadow quality, motion blur quality, environment texture quality, static geometry, dynamic geometry, MSAA. This I was running at 2 times, but they do have 4 times and 8 times as well, but I thought that 2 times was a good balance. You could also turn it off if you want to, but like I said, I thought 2 times was a good balance, and I wanted to keep it consistent through all of my testing here, and if I were to put it up at like 8 times, it really wouldn't make any sense, especially in 4K testing. So 2 times was more than enough in all of my testing, no matter what resolution I played. Even down at 1080p, 2 times MSAA was more than enough in this game, because it does have FXAA in here as well. We also got reflection quality, windshield reflection quality, mirror quality, and finally world car level of detail. So these are all of the options that I was using through all of my testing, no matter which one of the cards that we were looking at. And speaking of those cards, we're going to start off with the GTX 1080 here in my main system, the biggest card that we got in the house, and then we'll take a look at the 1060 versus the RX 480. So starting off with that GTX 1080 with 1080p and 1440p, we could see an average here at 1080 of 84 FPS and a minimum of 68. And when bumping that up to 1440p, we got an average of 78 FPS and a minimum of 63. So both of these resolutions, even 1440, the GTX 1080 is not having any trouble keeping up with it. And also I was looking at, I was able to keep track of, the GPU usage and CPU usage on a secondary screen because I don't have my traditional Afterburner overlays. And I could see that it was using over 5 gigabytes when testing at 1440p and between 4 and 5 gigabytes when testing at 1080p. So those are things you might want to keep in mind. It was pegging the card up at like 95 to 90% usage pretty consistently when I was actually playing the game, and CPU usage for me was around 25 to 30%. So I wasn't seeing any bottlenecks there as far as the CPU was concerned. When we switch that over now to 4K and ultra-wide testing, on 4K we saw an average of 60 FPS, so great to see that all the way up at ultra, and a minimum of 51. So it didn't hold that 60 solid. If you wanted to keep the solid 60, you may want to go through there and tweak some of those options, probably dropping the MSAA off, because the 2 times there you really don't need that at 4K. I found the FXAA was more than enough, so you can definitely tweak that to get the solid 60 frames that you're probably going to be wanting at 4K, even if you're running a single GTX 1080. And at ultra-wide, 3440 by 1440, we did an average of 68 FPS and a minimum of 59, so that's really right there, right around 60. That's barely below 60 at all, so it's able to run this game at a 60 frames per second, even at the 3440 by 1440, and we got the average as well on 4K, so really running amazing on the 1080, really, but that shouldn't be much of a surprise. But the optimization for 4K I thought was really good. When we switch now over to our mid-range cards, the RX 480 and the GTX 1060. First, we got the RX 480 up from AMD, running also on those latest drivers, 16.9.2. We got an average of 67 FPS and a minimum of 55, and that's at 1080p. When we bump that up to 1440p, we got an average of 54 FPS and a minimum of 53. Now we switch gears over to the GTX 1060. We can see at 1080p we got an average of 65 FPS and a minimum of 55. So it came in just under the RX 480 there for 1080p performance, losing by 2 FPS in the averages and tying it just right on in the minimums. When we switch that over to 1440p, again, it did lose to the RX 480 only by 1 FPS, pulling in an average of 53 frames per second and a minimum of 42. So quite a big drop there for the minimums on the GTX 1060 at 1440p compared to the RX 480, which had it up at 53 FPS. So I would say that the RX 480 was a bit more consistent, and I could also see that in the visuals when I was actually playing. I could kind of see some hitching. Felt like things were kind of loading in a little bit more on the GTX 1060. So when all is said and done with Forza Horizon 3, I think the optimization on this game is doing pretty good. I mean, coming out day one here for a UWP title, which has not had the best track record with some of the games coming out. Forza Apex did run really well, so I was looking forward to seeing this and seeing how this could run as well, being a DirectX 12 title, and it does appear to be pretty well optimized as far as I'm concerned. We did see the 1060 and the RX 480 dipping below 60 FPS at 1440p, but it was still running really well, and you could certainly go and tweak those options to get it up to solid 60 frames on those cards, even at 1440p. So I think they did a really good job optimizing this game, and AMD and NVIDIA with getting good optimized drivers out, and the 1060 versus the RX 480, in the averages, it's so close, it's so neck and neck that it's just almost a tie, but the RX 480 does win out by a slight margin. And in the minimums, they certainly did win out there, especially when at 1440p. So I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. Please let me know your thoughts on the performance numbers for Forza Horizon 3 down in the description below. And if there's any more testing you would like to see me do on this game here in the near future, then that may be something we could revisit with a different configuration or maybe different graphics options. I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments. I'm here to work for you. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, though. Like I said, it's late. And now I gotta edit this video and upload it and all that stuff. And, thumbnail too. Damn it, the workday never ends. It never ends, guys. Alright, I'll catch you next time. Turn up.